Okay, from the mothership, let's peek into the pages of the new edition of Newsmax Magazine with the editor-in-chief, Ken Chandler, who joins us now from New York City. Mr. Chandler, always a pleasure to see you, my friend. How are things in the Big Apple?
Things are beautiful, and it's a pleasure to be with you, Ed.
Things are beautiful. Good. I always like to hear that. Whenever I talk about my old home, keep using beautiful. That's good. Everything's fine. Give us an idea. What do you got coming up for the new edition?
We miss you.
Ken, anytime, really, before we get there, anytime, it's okay. I'll pick up. We're ready to do it. We'll bring the whole team up to New York. We'll do the whole show up there for about a month. How's that?
I'll send you the ticket this afternoon.
You're on. Okay. Tell us about the new edition of the magazine, Ken.
Okay, well, so in the new edition of Newsmax Magazine, we have a very interesting cover story written by the noted presidential historian Craig Shirley. And the subject is Richard Nixon. Now, you ask yourself, why do we do a cover story on Richard Nixon? Well, next month, August the 9th to be exact, it's the 40th anniversary of Nixon's resignation, the resignation of the 37th President of the United States. And it's kind of one of those events, I think, for those of us who were around at that time, we all remember exactly where we were when Nixon went on TV and resigned. But we wanted to revisit the Nixon presidency because, it's widely tainted by Watergate. Everybody associates Nixon with Watergate. But we asked Craig to look into the presidency and really reevaluate it and see whether the presidency was as bad as people, particularly on the left, would have you believe. And we got some very interesting responses from Craig.
Is it still fair to say that, and you talk about Nixon himself, and he's legendary, he's iconic, he's criminal to some people, he's so many things to so many different people, that even after all these years, we don't know a lot about the man. I mean, there's, of course, a lot of information out there, but there's still a fascination to know more and more about Nixon because he was a true turning point in this country's history. That was where the country spun in so many ways.
Absolutely, in many ways, absolutely astonishing. I mean, he was probably, arguably, the greatest foreign policy president we have ever had. I mean, he went to China, he opened up communist China. That in itself was a huge accomplishment. It also had the effect of encircling the Soviets, put them eventually on the wrong side of the Cold War, on the losing side of the Cold War. He ended the Vietnam War. He brought the prisoners of war home. So it was an amazing foreign policy presidency. But of course, it all got buried under the avalanche of Watergate. And the purpose of this piece really is not to whitewash Nixon. I mean, we know that he made a lot of mistakes. But what Craig Shirley discovered when he wrote this piece was that Nixon was really the victim of a huge double standard in Washington. In those days, and we're talking about the 1970s, the media really was the three broadcast networks and the principal newspapers like the New York Times, the Washington Post. They were all in the hands of liberals. And the owners of the networks and the owners of those newspapers, the editors, they despised Richard Nixon. And they treated him completely differently to the way that they treated Lyndon Johnson or even President Kennedy, who came before, who themselves were guilty of doing things that really should have been exposed, but Indeed. They were all brushed under the carpet.
Indeed. It is the new edition of Newsmax Magazine. Ken, join us anytime. Come on in here, tell us what's coming up in the magazine, and as always, we'll focus on what's coming up on the mothership on Newsmax.com as well. Pleasure, my friend, and I'll be waiting for those tickets. Remember, there's about a dozen of us, so we're all set to go.
They're on their way.
All right, Ken Chandler, thank you so much. The new edition again of Newsmax Magazine, Richard Nixon Revisited. Certainly something that everybody needs to at least think about and at least learn more about because indeed he is one of the more intriguing presidents on just about every side of the ledger. That's Newsmax Now, and this is another chance for us to revisit history again in an American moment.
Abraham Lincoln began the war between the states with a single stated purpose, to preserve the Union. So it surprised everyone when in July of 1862, President Lincoln announced his intentions to issue an Emancipation Proclamation to free the Southern slaves. Lincoln was urged to delay his proclamation until the Union Army could boast a battlefield victory. That opportunity came at the Battle of Antietam, when Union forces drove Lee's army out of Maryland. 5 days later, on September 22, 1862, President Lincoln issued the preliminary Emancipation Proclamation, stating slaves in those areas still in rebellion within 100 days will be freed. This action made slavery the focus of the war and ultimately caused France and England to withdraw their support of the South. The following January, Lincoln issued the actual Emancipation Proclamation, stating that all persons held as slaves within the rebel states are, and henceforth shall be, free. You're watching An American Moment on Newsmax TV.